I see faces I know and don't know. I'm imagining that you are feeling some of the things I felt this week.
Excuse me, Sharon, could you lower the mic a little bit? I have trouble hearing.
Sure. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. I imagine you're feeling some of the things I'm feeling. Fear, worry, grief. The list goes on. But the other thing I see when I look around the room is people who are here because we share common values. We share the belief that human lives in all their amazing and beautiful forms matter and should be respected. We believe in equity. We believe in care. We believe in community, not just for some of us, for all of us. We may have different shapes for those feelings. We have different subsets of belief. It doesn't matter. We are kindred spirits. And we are here. There is this plant that grows, I'm not going to say in my garden because it grows everywhere, all over this putative lawn, whatever, it's there. It's called ground ivy, and when you look at it, it looks innocent. It has these little fluted leaves, and this little stem that's delicate, and this stuff gets going, and it spreads, and you cannot get a shovel in it. It bounces off. The only way you can get rid of it is to come in at the side where it's not fully protected by the others, the other plants. Get under it and roll it up like a blanket because it's not giving up its hold. But the only vulnerable place is on the edge where it doesn't have the protection of its fellows. I think of Alexei Navalny. He's the Russian dissident who stood up to Putin, ran for election against him, got poisoned for his troubles, got shipped out to recover out of Russia, and he came back to fight again. Was arrested before he got off the airplane. Spent the next several years in prison, one after the other, getting worse all the time. Kept a journal, though. And this year when he died, it was smuggled out of the prison. And he wrote, on his birthday, maybe the third one in prison, my plan for the previous year was not to become brutalized and bitter and lose my laid-back demeanor. That would be the beginning of my defeat. And all my success in this was possible only because of your support. But the biggest thank you and salute I want to give today goes to all political prisoners. Most of them have it much harder than me. It was support and the sense of being in something together that gave him the inspiration to endure. That's endurance. There are a couple things that Navalny talked about that helped him endure. One was to realize that in prison, that was the worst that could happen, and he accepted it. He refused to get stuck in a quandary of what if and regret. Two things. It's a sinkhole into depression, to think about all the bad things that could have gone wrong and what if and regret. And it gave him ground to stand on. He didn't have to struggle and worry about what to do, if he did the right thing. He could stand on, we make the best of what we have and we look forward. That's tough. That's really hard to get to. I don't think you get there without grieving. The other thing that he said that was helpful to him was religion, which is kind of surprising. He never talked about that in his political work. But I don't think he means religion in the sense of a particular God. I think he means it like the AA people, that there is a higher power that's in charge of things and you can't control everything. What's interesting is that about 40 years ago, an Israeli researcher named Antonovsky followed about 400 concentration camp survivors for the next 20 years. He interviewed them. And his goal was to find out, in terms of their long-term health, was there a difference between the people who stayed healthy, however you define that, and the people who didn't? And the things that he found that were most important were beliefs. And the thing that was central to the people who were resilient over the long haul was a belief that something benign was in charge, whether they knew what it was or not, and that things would be okay. Again, for some of us, that's a tough one. I mean, we can call it by different names. We can call it the universe, higher power, whatever we want. We could call it love. But I like what Rebecca Solnit calls it. She wrote a wonderful book called Hope in the Dark. She calls it hope. Now, one of the things, a story she tells when she writes about hope is about a Cambodian woman that she met in her travels. And this woman had survived the Pol Pot regime. And what she said was, if I didn't have hope, I wouldn't have struggled. And if I didn't struggle, I wouldn't have survived. But for Solnit, hope is not naive. You know, hope is not everything's going to be okay, la-di-da. Hope, let me read you the quote. Solnit, your opponents would love you to believe that it's hopeless, that you have no power, that there's no reason to act. You can't win. Hope is a power you don't have to surrender, and a power you don't have to throw away. She says that hope is located in the premises of uncertainty. Hope is in the cracks. You don't have to see it, but hope is keeping your eyes open to the openings, the possibilities. You know, those weeds that come up through the sidewalk. Hope is like that. She said, hope keeps your eyes open. Hope is something you earn through study, through resisting the ease of despair, through digging tunnels, opening doors, or finding people who do. Now, I read that, that's another Solnit quote, and I read that and I thought, what kind of study is she talking about? And she goes on to say, it's about remembering. Remembering what has been achieved. Remembering the distance that you've come. I started thinking about that, and I thought about, nobody expected the Berlin Wall to go down when it did. But all of a sudden, one day they decided, we've had enough, and the wall went down. I remember what it was like for me starting out as a young woman when I couldn't get credit in my own name. If I didn't want to change my name when I got married, that was a problem. Guys I worked for would come up and use me as an example of a particular kind of body type they liked. I mean, they still do that, right? But we have some recourse. Things are not where they need to be, but we have made progress. I have my own name and my own credit. So Solnit talks about the importance of remembering as a defiance of the message that we get that says you can't do anything. Well, we did. That's the importance of old people right now. I mean, we may not be able to march when the time comes, but we can remember. I read a transcript of Joe Biden's speech to the UN, his last speech. The context was it had been a bad day. People were struggling with the turmoil going on. There were lots of feelings. And Biden got up there and said, I remember when this started, and laid it all out. And shifted the perspective. And why did that work? Part of the credibility he had is because he was old. And he had been there. And he had lived it. And he had seen it. So we need the stories, and we need our old people right now to tell those stories. The other thing that matters is not just attitude, but action. Now, Solnit said, hope lives in the dark, in the cracks. I think that's true. The upside of that is we don't have to know what to do right now. We don't have to see a way forward. We have to have the hope to keep our eyes open for the cracks. I want to remind you at this moment about weeds. Weeds are weeds because they are so successful. Because they will do anything to survive. They will change the way they reproduce. If they'll change their gender. They will. They'll go out and they'll bloom at different times. They'll go to sun. They'll go to shade. They'll make 10,000 more seeds than they need. So what? Some of them survive. They'll creep underground where you can't see them. They'll look innocent when they're not. They disguise themselves as something else. They'll sort of grow under things and come up in the middle. They'll do anything. They find the cracks and they go for it, and they survive. We don't have to know where the cracks are. We have to keep our eyes open and find them. And hope keeps our eyes open. Hope is the memory of lived experience and the faith to look for the cracks. and community, because that's how we remember and have faith. We don't necessarily do it alone. When we can, it's harder. I remember I was coming home from being outside the other day. I'd been in a forest, and some of it was getting cut down, and that was really painful, but there were all these beautiful leaves, and I was trying to hold the joy and the sorrow and anger all at the same time, having a hard time doing it. And went to turn left on North Druid Hills, no light, and the traffic stopped. That's a miracle. I took a breath, something shifted, and I felt lighter. You know, I could go on. I could get through the day. You know, the cracks don't have to be big. They can be tiny. Because you don't know, what's going to matter to somebody. What's going to keep them doing the next step. Just look for the opening. Go for it. I mean, we tend to stop ourselves, I do anyway, by expecting that what I can do has to be grand and magnificent and meaningful. And it'd be great if it was. Who wouldn't like that? But so often it's the tiny stuff, the cracks. So, the thought I want to leave you with is we may be in the minority, but we are not alone. And be a weed.
Thank you, Sharon. And I know that when you sent in your title, we didn't know where we'd be today. So thank you for that. That was very encouraging. Where did Bill go? Right here. Okay.